The night I found out, I wasn't looking for trouble. It was a Wednesday, just a regular midweek slump. The kids, Megan and Tyler, were already asleep upstairs, and I had decided to catch up on some work in my home office. The house was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards. Little did I know, that silence was a prelude to the storm. I had just stepped into the kitchen for a glass of water when I heard my wife, Ashley, talking on the phone. Her voice was low, conspiratorial, the kind of tone that immediately puts your guard up. I wasn't eavesdropping at first, at least, not intentionally. But the words that drifted into my ears stopped me cold. Once he's done paying for the kids' private school, I'm filing for divorce. Then I'll accuse him of domestic abuse, just to make sure I get everything. Mark's already ready to move in with me and the kids, he's so much better than Luke. Honestly, I can't wait to finally be done with this charade. Mark. Who the hell was Mark? And accusing me of abuse? The water glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile. My heart pounded, adrenaline surged, but I stayed rooted to the spot. Her words continued, each one cutting deeper than the last. I packed my things already, she went on, chuckling. I've cancelled every bill under my name, emptied the joint accounts, and even took the savings. He won't see it coming. Oh, and you should have seen his clueless face today at dinner, he really thinks I'm still the perfect wife. It's pathetic. Perfect wife? She hadn't even made dinner tonight, we ordered takeout because she was too tired. My mind raced as I pieced together everything I'd missed, the late-night phone calls, the sudden interest in going to the gym, the unexplained charges on the credit card. How blind had I been? Ashley ended the call with a sickly sweet, "Love you, sis," and I heard her footsteps coming toward the kitchen. I ducked behind the pantry door, my hands shaking as I tried to breathe quietly. She walked in, humming to herself, completely oblivious to the fact that her web of lies had just unraveled. I stood there, hidden in the shadows, as my world came crashing down around me. The woman I'd shared my life with for 12 years, the mother of my children, had been plotting to destroy me, and she was enjoying it. I stayed behind that pantry door until I heard Ashley's footsteps retreat up the stairs. My breathing was shallow, my heart hammering like it wanted to escape my chest. Every second dragged as I pieced together what I'd just heard. She wasn't just cheating on me, no, this was a calculated betrayal. She was dismantling everything I had built, everything we had built, brick by brick, with a cold and deliberate hand. When the coast was clear, I crept out of the pantry. My mind was racing, but I knew one thing, I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed proof. Ashley was a liar, a manipulative snake, and if she was willing to accuse me of abuse, I couldn't afford to make a single wrong move. I went back to my office, shut the door, and started digging. Years ago, I installed a software tracker on our shared computer to monitor the kids' activity online. I never thought I'd use it to spy on my wife, but desperate times called for desperate measures. It took less than 5 minutes to pull up her browser history. What I found made my stomach churn. She had email exchanges with someone named Mark P. She hadn't even bothered to hide it, she used our joint email account, for God's sake. I opened one of the threads, and my hands trembled as I read the messages. Can't wait to see you again, babe. Luke is clueless as always. Let's finalize the plans for next weekend. Plans? What plans? My mind raced as I scrolled further. The kids love you already, she'd written in another email. Tyler thinks you're funnier than his dad, and Megan says you're way cooler. Soon, we'll be a real family. A real family? Was she trying to erase me from my own children's lives? The worst part was an attachment, a photo of the two of them, grinning like idiots, at what looked like a fancy restaurant. Her hand was resting on his, and he had that smug, punchable face. That was when I saw it, my credit card on the table. She had been whining and dining this Mark guy on my dime. As the anger boiled inside me, I found more damning evidence. Venmo payments to Mark. Hotel reservations for weekends when she was supposedly visiting her sick mother. Even an Amazon wishlist full of gifts she'd bought for him, expensive gadgets, designer cologne, things I'd never seen her spend money on for me. And then there was her private folder. I hesitated before opening it, but curiosity won out. Inside were dozens of text messages she had screenshotted, likely to giggle over later with her sister. Messages from Mark, calling me names like loser and pushover. Messages where she mocked me, calling me boring, predictable, and, worst of all, too stupid to see what's right in front of him. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like my chest was caving in. How could she do this to me? To us? Every memory I had of our relationship, our first date, our wedding day, the birth of our kids, it all felt like a lie. Like I had been living in a carefully constructed illusion, while Ashley laughed behind my back. I couldn't sit still. My office felt too small, too suffocating, so I grabbed my jacket and went outside. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were a tangled mess. I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood, replaying every red flag I'd ignored, every gut instinct I'd brushed off. The late nights out with her friends. The sudden need for me time. The dismissive attitude whenever I tried to bring up something serious. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let her fool me so completely? By the time I returned home, it was past midnight. I had made up my mind. If Ashley thought she could destroy me, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me like some doormat. I would fight back, but I had to be smart about it. I spent the next 2 hours gathering evidence. I copied her emails, saved her texts, and backed up her phone's data to a secure drive. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure I had every shred of proof to blow up her lies. By the time I finally crawled into bed, I felt a grim sense of determination. I didn't sleep much that night, lying there next to Ashley, who was blissfully unaware that her perfect little plan was starting to crumble. I stared at the ceiling, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. But beneath the pain, anger simmered. If she thought she could humiliate me, take my kids, and waltz into a new life with her lover, she had another thing coming. The next morning was painfully normal, which made it all the more surreal. Ashley was in the kitchen, sipping her coffee like she hadn't spent the night plotting my destruction. She greeted me with a smile that made my stomach turn, her tone syrupy sweet. "Good morning, honey," she said, setting a plate of toast in front of me. The same hands that had caressed another man were now serving me breakfast. It took everything I had not to shove the plate off the table. "Morning," I muttered, sitting down. My mind was racing, but I forced myself to act normal. Ashley was sharp, too sharp. If she suspected I knew, she'd turn the tables on me in an instant. I needed time to execute my plan. As I chewed my toast mechanically, Ashley launched into her usual chatter. She talked about Tyler's school project and Megan's upcoming ballet recital, sprinkling in subtle complaints about how hard her life was. I nodded along, my responses deliberately vague. But then, she slipped. "By the way," she said, casually scrolling through her phone, "I'm heading out this weekend. Mom's feeling worse, and she needs me to help with a few things around the house." There it was, her usual excuse. But now I knew the truth. She wasn't going to her mother's, she was meeting Mark. My grip tightened on my coffee mug, but I forced a smile. "Of course," I said. "Let me know if you need anything." Her eyes flickered for a moment, like she was surprised at how accommodating I was. Maybe she expected resistance, questions, suspicion. But I gave her none of that. Let her think she was still in control. The calmer I stayed, the harder her eventual fall would be. After she left for work, I sprang into action. First, I called my lawyer. Greg was a no-nonsense kind of guy, the type who thrived in high-stakes situations. When I told him what I'd uncovered, he didn't waste time with sympathy. "We need to move quickly," he said. "If she's already emptied the accounts, we need to file a financial motion to freeze whatever's left. We'll also need to secure evidence of her infidelity for the divorce proceedings." "I've got plenty," I replied, thinking of the emails and texts I'd backed up. "And she's planning to meet him this weekend. Can we use that?" "Absolutely," Greg said. "Hire a private investigator. If we can get photos or videos of her with this guy, it'll strengthen your case." That was all I needed to hear. After hanging up, I contacted a local PI named Jack. He came highly recommended, and his reputation for discretion was exactly what I needed. "Don't worry," Jack assured me over the phone. "By Monday, you'll have everything you need to bury her." The rest of the day was a blur of preparation. I called the bank to secure what little money was left in our joint accounts, moving it to an account in my name only. I changed the passwords on all our shared utilities and cancelled the automatic payments she'd set up. If she wanted to cut me off, I'd cut her off first. By the time Ashley came home that evening, I felt more in control than I had in days. She breezed through the door like nothing had happened, her face lighting up when she saw me cooking dinner. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was playing the dutiful husband while she was plotting her escape. "Smells amazing," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I flinched inwardly but didn't let it show. Instead, I smiled and handed her a glass of wine. "Just thought I'd do something nice for you," I said. The words tasted bitter, but the look of relief on her face told me I was playing my part perfectly. We sat down for dinner, and for the first time in days, I felt like I was the one holding the cards. Ashley chatted away about her day, oblivious to the fact that I was mentally cataloging every lie she told. "Mom's really struggling," she said, shaking her head. "It's hard, you know. Juggling everything here while trying to be there for her." "Must be tough," I replied, hiding my smirk. "You're so strong." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, I wondered if she actually believed her own lies. But then I remembered the emails, the texts, the photo of her and Mark laughing over dinner. No, Ashley wasn't strong, she was a coward. That night, as she slept soundly beside me, I finalized my plans. Jack had texted me earlier to confirm the details. He'd follow her from the moment she left the house on Friday, tracking her every move. By the end of the weekend, I'd have all the proof I needed to destroy her carefully crafted facade. As I stared at the ceiling, I felt a strange sense of calm. The initial shock and hurt were still there, but they were now buried beneath a growing resolve. Ashley had underestimated me, and that was her first mistake. Her second mistake? Thinking I wouldn't fight back. Friday morning came faster than I expected, and as I watched Ashley pack her overnight bag, I felt the strange duality of betrayal and resolve crash over me. She hummed to herself while folding clothes, her movements unhurried and casual, as if this were just another normal day. But I knew better. I knew she wasn't packing for her ailing mother. She was packing for Mark. I leaned against the doorway, forcing a neutral expression. "Need any help with that?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She turned, startled for a moment, before recovering with a smile. "No, I've got it. Just a quick trip, nothing major." Liar. Every word out of her mouth was like a dagger now, but I played my part. If she suspected even an ounce of doubt, it could ruin everything. "Drive safe," I said as she zipped up her bag. "Give your mom my love." "I will," she replied, her voice sickeningly sweet. She stepped closer, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek. "You're the best, Luke." I managed a tight smile, watching as she headed out the door. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I was on my phone. "She's on the move," I told Jack, my private investigator. "You know what to do." Got it, Jack replied. I'll keep you updated. The rest of the day was excruciating. Time crawled as I tried to focus on anything but the pit forming in my stomach. I cleaned the garage, played catch with Tyler, helped Megan with her math homework, all the while checking my phone obsessively for updates from Jack. By mid-afternoon, the first text came through. She just checked into the Westview Inn. Room 214. She's not alone. Of course, she wasn't alone. I gritted my teeth, fighting the urge to drive over there and kick the door down. But I reminded myself that this wasn't about vengeance, it was about strategy. If I confronted her now, I'd lose the upper hand. No, I needed the evidence, and Jack was delivering it in spades. Over the next few hours, the updates painted a picture that made my blood boil. Ashley and Mark went out for dinner, laughing and holding hands like they didn't have a care in the world. They returned to the hotel late, sneaking in through the side entrance. Jack sent me photos, grainy but clear enough to prove her infidelity. One picture, in particular, made my stomach churn, Ashley leaning into Mark, her hand on his chest, her face inches from his as they stood outside the hotel. She looked happy. Happier than I'd seen her in years. And that hurt more than I wanted to admit. By Saturday evening, Jack had compiled a full dossier. Photos, timestamps, even a video of Ashley and Mark leaving the hotel together the next morning. It was more than enough to bury her in court. But the weekend wasn't over yet. On Sunday, Ashley returned home like nothing had happened. She walked through the door, her overnight bag slung over her shoulder, and greeted me with a smile. "Hey, babe," she said, setting the bag down by the stairs. "How was your weekend?" How was my weekend? My knuckles tightened as I gripped the edge of the counter, forcing myself to stay calm. "Busy," I replied. "Took the kids to the park yesterday. They had a blast." "That's great," she said, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my head just enough that her lips brushed my cheek instead. She frowned slightly but didn't say anything, brushing it off as if I'd been distracted. "And your mom?" I asked, my voice deceptively casual. "How's she doing?" Ashley hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "Oh, you know," she said, shrugging. "Same as always. A little better, actually. I think the fresh air did her some good." Another lie. I nodded, biting back a bitter laugh. She had no idea that her carefully rehearsed performance was unraveling with every word she spoke. That evening, as she put the kids to bed, I locked myself in my office. I opened the file Jack had sent me and stared at the evidence, a storm brewing inside me. I knew I had to confront her, but timing was everything. If I played my cards right, this confrontation would be the beginning of her downfall. When she finally came downstairs, I was sitting in the living room, waiting. My heart was pounding, but my expression was calm, controlled. Ashley tilted her head, giving me that fake, sugary smile that made my skin crawl. "Everything okay?" she asked, sitting down across from me. I studied her for a moment, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm. Finally, I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Who's Mark?" I asked. Her face went pale, the color draining so fast it was almost comical. For a split second, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. But then she recovered, plastering on a confused smile. "Mark? What are you talking about?" I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Don't play dumb, Ashley. I know everything." Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. But there wasn't one. Not this time. The room fell into a suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Ashley's fake confusion lingered for a few seconds before her expression hardened. She was a master manipulator, I'd give her that. She shifted tactics so fast it almost impressed me, almost. What the hell are you talking about, Luke? She snapped, crossing her arms in a mirror of my stance. Her voice was sharp, defensive, but her eyes betrayed her. They were darting around, looking for a way to spin this. Are you accusing me of something? I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I reached for my phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the coffee table toward her. On the screen was the photo Jack had taken, her and Mark, laughing outside the Westview Inn, her hand on his chest. Her face fell, her composure cracking just slightly. But then, like the true actress she was, she quickly regrouped. She grabbed the phone and sneered, shaking her head like I'd just shown her a bad joke. So, what? You hired someone to follow me, she said, tossing the phone back toward me. That's pretty pathetic, Luke. I was with my mom this weekend. That's probably just someone who looks like me. Drop the act, Ashley, I said, my voice cold. I have photos, videos, emails, texts. I know you've been seeing Mark. I know you've been lying to me for months. And I know you've been planning to leave me after I pay for the kids' tuition. So don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is all in my head. For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth slightly open. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out her next move. When she spoke again, her voice was dripping with venom. Fine, she hissed. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Mark. And you know what? He's everything you're not. He actually listens to me, cares about me. You've been so busy with work and playing the perfect dad that you've forgotten about me. I felt a pang of anger rise in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. Don't you dare try to pin this on me, Ashley. You could have talked to me, worked through things like an adult. But instead, you chose to lie, cheat, and manipulate me. You even used the kids as part of your plan. How low can you sink? Her lips curled into a smirk, and for a moment, I didn't recognize the woman sitting in front of me. You're such a martyr, aren't you, Luke? Always acting like you're the victim. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, I wouldn't have needed someone else. The sheer audacity of her words made my blood boil. I stood up, towering over her, my fists clenched at my sides. Don't you dare twist this around. You're the one who destroyed this marriage. You're the one who betrayed me. And you're the one who's going to pay for it. Oh, please, she said, rolling her eyes. What are you going to do, Luke? Cry about it? You're pathetic. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Losing my temper wouldn't accomplish anything. Instead, I leaned down, my voice low and firm. You're right about one thing, Ashley. I'm not going to cry about this. I'm going to take this evidence to my lawyer, and then I'm going to make sure you get exactly what you deserve. You won't take my kids, my money, or my dignity. Not anymore. Her smirk faltered, just for a moment. You think you can win? Good luck, Luke. You're no match for me. I'll make sure the court believes every word I say. Domestic abuse, emotional neglect, I'll paint you as the villain, and you'll lose everything. Her words were like a slap in the face, but they only strengthened my resolve. You can try, I said, meeting her gaze. But I have the truth on my side. And when this is over, you'll be the one left with nothing. She glared at me, her facade slipping further with every passing second. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She knew I wasn't the pushover she'd taken me for. She knew I was serious. Without another word, she stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I sat back down on the couch, my hands shaking from the adrenaline. The confrontation had taken everything out of me, but I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out in the open now, and there was no going back. I spent the rest of the evening strategizing, preparing for the next battle. Ashley had shown her true colors, and I wasn't about to let her get the last word. She thought she was untouchable, but she was wrong. The game was on. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt like a battleground. Ashley barely looked at me as she came downstairs, her movements stiff and defensive. She grabbed a cup of coffee, ignoring the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. But I wasn't in the mood to tiptoe around her anymore. The kids came bounding down the stairs, oblivious to the war brewing between their parents. Tyler was excited about his school science project, and Megan was chattering about her upcoming ballet recital. I plastered on a smile for their sake, determined to keep their world as normal as possible, even as mine crumbled around me. Ashley, on the other hand, barely acknowledged them. She muttered something about needing to run errands and left the house in a hurry, her coffee untouched. I knew she wasn't going grocery shopping or picking up dry cleaning, she was planning her next move. But so was I. The first thing I did after she left was call my lawyer, Greg, to update him on the confrontation. She admitted to the affair, I said, pacing my office. And she threatened to accuse me of abuse and emotional neglect. She thinks she can manipulate the court. Greg didn't sound surprised. That's standard for someone like her. But we've got the upper hand, Luke. The evidence Jack collected is solid, and her threats will fall apart under scrutiny. We'll file for divorce this week and push for full custody. You need to focus on staying calm and keeping your head clear. That's easier said than done, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. She's not just trying to take me down, she's trying to erase me from my kids' lives. I can't let that happen. You won't, Greg assured me. But we need to play this smart. Let her dig her own grave. Don't confront her again unless absolutely necessary. After hanging up, I spent the next few hours going through more of Ashley's emails and texts, making sure I hadn't missed anything. The more I read, the angrier I got. She and Mark had been mocking me for months, joking about how clueless I was, how easy it would be to take everything from me. They even discussed plans to move into my house once the divorce was finalized. But what infuriated me the most were the messages about my kids. Ashley had been feeding Mark stories about how distant I was, painting me as an uninvolved father who cared more about work than his family. It was a blatant lie, anyone who knew me could see how much I loved Megan and Tyler. But Ashley was laying the groundwork for her custody battle, and she was playing dirty. By the time Ashley returned that afternoon, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her provoke me or manipulate me. Instead, I'd let her dig herself deeper into her lies while I stayed one step ahead. She walked into the house with a strained smile, trying to act normal. "Hey," she said, her voice overly casual. "I picked up some groceries." "Thanks," I replied, not looking up from my laptop. My calm demeanor seemed to throw her off, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she busied herself in the kitchen, probably trying to figure out what my next move would be. That evening, I made a point to spend extra time with the kids. We played board games in the living room, laughing and joking like we always did. Megan insisted on doing my hair with one of her toy brushes, and Tyler challenged me to a game of chess, claiming he'd totally beat me this time. Ashley watched us from the corner of the room, her expression unreadable. As the kids went to bed, Megan hugged me tightly. "Daddy, you're the best," she whispered, and for a moment, I felt a lump rise in my throat. No matter what Ashley tried to do, she couldn't take this away from me. When Ashley and I were alone again, the tension returned. She sat across from me at the dining table, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. "You're awfully calm," she said, her tone laced with suspicion. "What are you planning, Luke?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "I'm just thinking about the future, Ashley. About what's best for the kids." Her eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, I saw a crack in her armor. "The kids will be fine," she said, her voice defensive. "They'll adjust." "Adjust to what?" I asked, leaning forward. To you uprooting their lives for your fling with Mark? To you dragging them through a custody battle just to hurt me? Is that what you think is best for them? Her face hardened, her defensive mask snapping back into place. Don't act like you're some saint, Luke. You're not perfect. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, none of this would have happened. Enough with the excuses, Ashley, I said, my voice firm. This isn't about me. This is about you and the choices you made. You're the one who lied. You're the one who cheated. And you're the one who's going to have to live with the consequences. She glared at me, her hands gripping the edge of the table. For a moment, I thought she might explode, but then she stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. You think you're so righteous, she spat. But you'll see. You're not as untouchable as you think. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I sat there, my hands gripping the edge of the table, the sound of her footsteps echoing upstairs. Her threats didn't scare me anymore. If anything, they fueled my resolve. I was ready for whatever came next. The next few days were a blur of silent hostility and strategic preparation. Ashley barely spoke to me, her glares like daggers every time we crossed paths. I could tell she was fuming, but for once, she didn't have the upper hand. That knowledge gave me the strength to keep my head high, even as the tension in the house grew unbearable. By Tuesday, Greg had filed the divorce papers. I made sure Ashley was served at home, knowing it would catch her off guard. I wanted her to see that I wasn't the same pushover she had spent months mocking with her lover. I was taking control, and she couldn't stop me. The moment the papers landed in her hands, her mask of indifference shattered. She stared at them, her face flushing with anger, her hands trembling slightly. You're really doing this, she spat, tossing the papers onto the kitchen counter. You think you can just walk away and take everything? I'm not walking away, Ashley, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm protecting what's mine. You've made your choices, and now it's time to face the consequences. Her lips curled into a snarl. You think you're so clever, don't you? You have no idea what you've started. I shrugged, pretending to be unaffected by her venom. We'll see. She stormed off, slamming the door to the bedroom behind her. I let out a slow breath, the adrenaline from the confrontation still coursing through me. This wasn't just about the divorce anymore, it was about survival. I had to stay one step ahead, not just for my sake, but for the kids. That evening, I sat down with Megan and Tyler to explain what was happening. It was the hardest conversation I'd ever had, but I refused to let Ashley twist the narrative. Mom and I are going through some changes, I told them, keeping my voice steady. But no matter what happens, we both love you very much. That's not going to change. Megan's eyes filled with tears, and she crawled into my lap, burying her face in my chest. Why are you fighting? She whispered. It's complicated, sweetheart, I said, stroking her hair. But I promise, I'll always be here for you. Tyler, ever the logical one, furrowed his brow. Is it because of that Mark guy Mom talks to? My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He shrugged. I heard her talking to him on the phone a few times. She said he was going to be around more. Is he going to live here? My stomach churned. The thought of Mark stepping into my home, trying to replace me, was almost too much to bear. But I forced a smile for Tyler's sake. We'll figure things out, buddy. Don't worry about that. After tucking the kids into bed, I retreated to my office to regroup. The pieces were falling into place, but there was still work to be done. I reached out to Jack, the private investigator, to get an update on Ashley's activities. She's been laying low, Jack said. But Mark's been active. He's posted a few things online, pictures of her, some not-so-subtle captions. You want me to dig deeper? Absolutely, I replied. If he's dumb enough to post evidence, we're going to use it. The next day, Jack sent me a goldmine of information. Mark had been bragging on social media about his amazing weekend with Ashley, posting photos of the two of them at the Westview Inn and even tagging her in one of his posts. The captions were nauseating: "True love wins," and "Finally found my forever." I forwarded everything to Greg, who assured me it would strengthen my case. "This guy's arrogance is going to cost her," he said. "Keep documenting everything." That evening, Ashley finally broke her silence. She cornered me in the living room, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're ruining my life," she hissed, her voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. "Do you know what you're doing to them? To me? Ruining your life?" I repeated, incredulous. "Ashley, you did that all on your own. You lied, cheated, and manipulated me. Don't you dare try to make me the villain here." She threw her hands up, pacing the room like a caged animal. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're pathetic, Luke. Pathetic and predictable. Mark warned me you'd pull something like this." "Good," I said, standing my ground. "Then you can tell Mark he's next. He's just as guilty as you are, and I'm not going to let either of you waltz out of this unscathed." Her face twisted with rage. "You're going to regret this," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll make sure of it." "Bring it on," I said, my voice cold. "I'm done playing your games, Ashley." She stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I sank onto the couch, exhaustion washing over me. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was gaining ground. The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings, court filings, and strategic moves. Ashley, true to form, doubled down on her lies. She filed a response to the divorce papers, accusing me of being an absentee father, emotionally neglectful, and, just as she'd threatened, abusive. She painted herself as a victim, claiming she had no choice but to seek happiness elsewhere because of how I had failed her as a husband. But she underestimated how much I had prepared. The day of our first court hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of anger and grim determination as I walked into the courtroom. Ashley sat across from me, looking every bit the picture of innocence in her tailored dress and carefully composed expression. But beneath the surface, I knew she was seething. She didn't think I'd have the guts to stand up to her. She thought she'd win with lies and manipulation. My lawyer, Greg, presented the evidence Jack and I had meticulously gathered. Emails, texts, photos, and even a video of her and Mark entering the hotel together. The judge's face hardened as Greg laid everything out, piece by piece. When he brought up the social media posts, Mark's arrogant captions about their true love, I could see Ashley's composure begin to crack. But the real bombshell came when Greg called Jack to the stand. He testified about Ashley's activities, confirming that she had not only been unfaithful but also deliberately plotted to accuse me of abuse as part of her scheme to gain custody of the kids. The courtroom was silent as he recounted her phone calls, her emails, and her outright disdain for the truth. Ashley's lawyer tried to fight back, but the evidence was damning. Her lies unraveled faster than she could patch them together, and by the end of the hearing, it was clear that the judge wasn't buying her act. When the ruling came down, it was everything I had hoped for. I was granted primary custody of Megan and Tyler, with Ashley receiving supervised visitation until a psychological evaluation could be completed. The judge cited her reckless behavior and poor judgment as a significant factor in the decision. As for the financials, Ashley's attempt to drain the accounts backfired spectacularly. The court ordered her to repay a significant portion of the money she had taken, and she was left scrambling to figure out how to cover her legal fees. When the hearing ended, Ashley stormed out of the courtroom without a word. I followed at a distance, watching as she argued with her lawyer in the hallway. Mark was nowhere to be seen, a coward, just like I'd suspected. He probably realized Ashley was more trouble than she was worth once the consequences started catching up with her. Later that evening, back at home, I sat down with Megan and Tyler to explain the situation in a way they could understand. "Mom made some mistakes," I said gently, choosing my words carefully. "But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. She just needs some time to figure things out. For now, you'll be staying here with me." Megan nodded solemnly, her small hand gripping mine. Tyler looked thoughtful, then asked, "So does this mean Mark's not coming around anymore?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. "No, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "Mark's not going to be part of this family. It's just us now." The relief on their faces was palpable, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. The storm had passed, and though the wreckage was still there, I knew we'd rebuild. Ashley's descent didn't end there. Over the next few months, I heard through mutual friends that Mark had dumped her, leaving her to pick up the pieces of her shattered reputation. She tried to play the victim, spinning stories about how I had trapped her in a loveless marriage, but no one bought it. Her lies had been exposed, and the damage was irreversible. As for me, I focused on moving forward. I threw myself into being the best father I could be, making sure Megan and Tyler felt loved and secured despite the upheaval in their lives. I also took time to reflect on everything that had happened, trying to make sense of the betrayal and what it had taught me. In the end, I realized that Ashley's actions said more about her than they ever did about me. Her selfishness, her dishonesty, her complete disregard for the people she was supposed to care about, it wasn't my failure, it was hers. And though the pain of her betrayal would always linger, I refused to let it define me. One evening, as I was tucking Megan into bed, she looked up at me with her big, trusting eyes. "Are you happy now, Daddy?" she asked. The question caught me off guard, but after a moment, I nodded. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said, smiling. "I think I am." And for the first time in a long time, it felt true.